don't know it enough. Well, let me tell you something. Yeah, I do. You once told me I wouldn't feel it enough. Well, let me tell you that, baby, I do.
If there's gonna be a theme to this story of mine, I can easily say that sex will be it. How I felt about sex as a guy, and how I feel about it now as a girl, and how it has driven me throughout the entirety of my life. It could also be about how I use sex to determine potential partners, rate, market, and even sell myself. It can refer to sexual gender, sexual preference, and also sexual orientation. Simply put, if the word has any meaning at all in any context, chances are that I'll most likely cover how it is applied to my life. So where does sex lead one? To orgasm, of course. The aftermath of sex. I like the sound of that. Well, let's see. As a guy, sex was pretty simple. Well, to a guy, sex is pretty simple and uncomplicated. But never in my head, though. See, when you're a guy, pretending that your girlfriend is either a guy, or pretending that you're a woman while she goes down on you, and doing so on a regular basis way beyond fantasy, that might indicate something of a problem. But to a regular dude, sex is pretty straightforward. Mind you, when I speak in generalizations, I'm simply referring to events from my own personal experience. I may be worldly, but I wouldn't go so far as to say that I'm a know-it-all. I guess I'm just trying to justify my speaking about men as if I actually understand how they think. At this point, I kinda just combine everything I've learned about life and sloppily blend it into this jumbled mental mess. Still, I can only assume that to the average person, fetishes and fantasies aside, that all sexual roads eventually lead to Mount Monotonous. I've simply seen too much to believe otherwise. As a guy, life was also pretty straightforward, almost as if I never even had to think about my future. It all kinda just laid itself out for me. I liked working on cars, so I went to a Votech after high school to learn a little more, got a job, made lots of money, used the hot little car I built to get even hotter chicks, fucked them, and simply moved on with my life. It wasn't until it came to sex and relationships, as I'm sure we all have hopes, fears, and doubts about, that these little entities rather began causing me more confusion than satisfaction. Personal relationships and physical contact often made me question my inner person. I just couldn't grasp how having a one-night stand be grounds to question my entire sexual existence. But it did. Whether it was a fling or a genuine relationship, all my interactions caused was mental turmoil. I guess that getting a sex change can almost be related to having your first kid. There are no instruction manuals to follow, and reading about what to expect will only take you so far. For instance, no one ever told me that as a woman, I'd often be more concerned about his feelings, rather my own. I certainly wasn't expecting to become this aware of other people's needs. In fact, my feelings in general are nothing like what I expected them to be once I entered into this. I went from simply wondering as a guy if I was doing it right, to wondering if the person I'm with is enjoying me, as if there's this strange urge to make them happy as well. I'll often find myself asking if I feel a strong enough connection to let go, to let someone else take over and have them in my life. Perhaps these thoughts come naturally to normal people, but I wouldn't really know what that's like, for I'm anything but normal and natural. You most likely don't even realize that such considerations are constantly occurring within your own subconscious as a part of your everyday thought processes. For you, as a normal person, things most likely just are. It's kinda like breathing. You just do it. But take a few medical classes and actually see the inside of a pair of lungs. Maybe map the brain waves which tell them to inherently do what it is they do without say-so, and then you'll suddenly understand what's going on. It's a really weird feeling to one day all of a sudden have such a profound comprehension about the workings of some things once taken for granted. However, Had it not been for my being born different, I most likely wouldn't be writing this right now and would be living as plastic an existence as the rest of society. I might even go so far as to say that having a sex change increased my perception 100-fold. The differences between the genders go so far beyond what's laid out to your normal set of eyes. No amount of studying or research could ever prepare you for such a change, and I'm not just talking about which bathroom you use or what clothes you wear. I'm not even referring to the hormonal differences or who has the babies. I'm telling you that there's an entirely contrary reality between the genders altogether. The human drives are much more internally complex than simple chemicals and chromosomes. It's instinctual. It's who you are and how you interact with those around you. It affects you every waking minute of your existence, and you probably don't even know it. It's about socially imposed behaviors that you must follow in order to successfully function in society. And a lot of it often makes no sense. But that's who we are. And then when it comes to mating, that can be even more complicated if you wish to dissect it, especially after being programmed to do things a certain way. I simply cannot apply the way I once did things to the way I do them now. Don't get me wrong, as either gender, I'm sure there's always an inherent need to sometimes just get off. But beyond that, in order to cope in human society, you need to understand your role. Otherwise, you may simply find yourself very lonely, and you'll never truly experience what living in our culture has to offer. I guess the bottom line here is, there are just a lot more feelings involved as a woman. Maybe the thoughts I now have during sex are simply what normal people experience. All I know is that there's this whole other sense of giving of myself now. Now I'm just as concerned with pleasing him as I'm interested in pleasing myself. It's all about the connection, and to be honest, without it, sex just isn't worth the time anymore. Unless, of course, it's for a vast sum of money. But now I'm getting ahead of myself. Nothing is ever a straight line anymore. Now there's this whole other field of self to satisfy. Emotions. And not only do they confuse your logical thought processes, they often guide you in a totally different direction than your brain tells you to go. How I sum up a sexual partner is completely different as a woman. Just whether or not he'd be willing to spend the night afterwards could mean a difference of my sleeping with him or not. All in all, it's a catch-22. Yeah, it's a shit ton easier to find sex as a woman, but without the connection, it's not all that likely that I'll ever get anything from the encounter. When all is said and done, all a guy needs is a warm and squishy hole, a horny thought, and a few minutes of steady rhythm to rub one out. Far from what the truth of what a woman needs. Not to mention that women rarely and truly orgasm from all sexual interactions. But if a guy doesn't come, it's generally considered a failed attempt. As a guy, sex always lost its luster a little too quickly, as did my interest with whomever I'd just done it with. Sleep was always the most desired option once the pants were back on, and thoughts about the rest of the day returned all too quickly. But now as a woman, it's actually after the fact that things become interesting. Then I get to wait and wonder if he'll ever call me again. I often wonder if I would have even realized these things had I been born a normal female from the start, but I can only assume that much like breathing and blinking your eyes, such contemplations would otherwise only exist involuntarily and without notice. When my secondary sense of self and conscience awakened, it was kind of like, Here are these new feelings. They are female feelings. You will have to get used to them along with all of the other aspects that women go through, because the longer it takes you to get it right, the less rewarding of a life society will allow you to lead. There's an eternal paradox woven into the convictions I carry, and with everything so sudden and new, there was no second lifetime to again wear numb and forgetful to the fact that there really are monsters in the closet. I entered into this with a full sense of self and conscience already present. I'm now doing this with the established ability to question why. Why do I have to act this way in order to fit in? Is it simply done to increase my appeal to potential mates? There's a phrase I once read: men give love for sex, and women give sex for love. But it seems that once a woman gives herself sexually, perhaps a little too soon, that men lose interest. And seeing as how for a woman to give herself sexually, she must first open up emotionally, the paradox lies within the fact that men seem to function best by giving sexually before they choose to commit emotionally. In reality, what they need to do is get the baby batter off their brains before they can be themselves, like in that movie There's Something About Mary. There is much weight to unload, a lot has built up, and until now, I've not had the time to put it all into legible words. Perhaps jail was just the time out I needed.